Hey, what's going on, everybody? Happy Tuesday to you all out
Yes.
there. I forgot which day of the week it was, but hey, Darby Rollins tuning in here with author Cade Scott. We're going to be having kind of like a deep dive conversation on developing fiction stories using Jarvis, using AI, weaving that into character development, storytelling, and just making your reader's experience going through your work as a writer that much more enjoyable. Cade has published over 100 short chat fiction stories on an app called Hooked, which I'm really excited to learn more about. And recently, one of his short horror films had eclipsed 100,000 views on YouTube that was released back in April. Can you give me a little background kind of on yourself in your own words and how you came across Jarvis?
I actually stumbled across it because I part-time for a digital marketing agency right now. And they started using Jarvis and allowed me to use Jarvis since I was the writer of the group. And so I started using the templates. I started using it for web copy, for social media copy, Google Ads copy, just general marketing materials like that. So in the marketing realm, it was like, great, my projects were sped up. I was writing so much, getting things accomplished in record time. And I started to think, could I do this with fiction? Could I do it with my fiction stories? Because I was running into writer's block there as well, of course. And so I just kind of started tinkering around with different fiction ideas, different character development ideas, and started asking Jarvis questions about my story, about my characters. And I was enthralled by what I found Jarvis could do.
Storytelling, screenwriting, just fiction in general, right? You're coming up with these stories that are designed to capture like our feelings and hold us in suspense in the term of horror. How are you using Jarvis for these short stories? Like, where does Jarvis fit in your process specifically?
What happened was I suffered from idea fatigue. And so it was each day it was, oh man, I feel like I've done everything. What's another idea? And now I kind of use Jarvis and I've created a recipe that maybe I can share with people afterwards that helps come up with ideas. All you do is type in the genre, and then you could type in horror and then say, hey, write 5 premises based on the genre above, and it'll give you 2 to 3 sentence outline of a story in that genre. It gave me the experience of writing hundreds of stories and figuring out what works and figuring out what's the pacing, what's a good pacing for a horror story, what needs to happen at the midpoint in order to keep your audience engaged and keep them reading from line to line to line. How do I tie in the beginning elements with the end so it all makes sense and comes together in an impactful way?
How are some ways that you're using Jarvis in your writing, in your authorship, to your screenplay to like actually make money? And just curious at how you're making income as a result of this.
People approach me for short screenplays or for short stories or for screenplays, and I use Jarvis as a tool to help me with that.
What would you, if you're looking at a short 5,000 word story, the parameters, like how does a story like that flow? You were mentioning earlier the cadence and like, when does this need to happen in a horror story? Like, do you have like a formula? How would you approach writing a 5,000 word short fictional story, horror being the topic?
I always try to use the same quote unquote formula or framework. And that's Dan Harmon's story circle. And it's what I found a lot of the hook stories fell into, but you have to condense it a little bit. For 5,000 words for that short of a story, there's only one movement that can happen, right? Whereas you look at a film, each scene has its own movement. And when I say movement, I mean something's changed. Something has altered the character's kind of perception or world to where it's not the same anymore, right? They can't go back. And so in a movie or a novel, you'll have many instances of that. In a 5,000 word story or a hooked story that's 1,000 words, you can only do that once, right? So it's usually one scene in one place. You have your hook at the beginning that immediately reaches out and grabs your audience. And then that can work as your inciting incident to kind of propel your character forward into the unknown world to the point where they adapt to that unknown world and either survive it or don't survive it, regardless, they come out the other end having changed for better or for worse. 5,000 words or 1,000 word short story, you have to make sure that plot is always being pushed forward, that each line you deliver is delivering new information, is pushing the story forward. We're not going back, we're not standing still. It has to go forward.
Would you be down to try and write a 5,000 word short story right now and like make it up on the fly and like actually go through the process? I'm curious, like how would we collaborate in making something like that with Jarvis?
Here's my recipes that I've kind of put together for fiction right now. But for this exercise, we use the fiction story idea and outline. We'll go ahead and run it. So you see here, we could start with an idea, a certain genre, get into short premise, come up with a title, and then we'll use that as the title here, and then the premise we'll use as the content brief. And then we'll just try to plot it out point by point. I have 7 plot points here. At least we can come up with an outline, I guess. All right. Let's stick with horror and see what we get. Let's see. So type in the genre, write a list of storylines based on the genre.
We got a psychological horror.
Ooh. All right. So it gives us kind of 3 storylines of premises here. A group of teenagers head to the woods for a Halloween weekend and become lost looking for their cabin. You're driving down a country road when you see an abandoned, broken down house on the side of the road. Your plane crashes in front of a small village, and throughout your time there, strange happenings keep taking place. This might be a high concept.
What a question too, from one of the comments.
Yeah.
Saying they find that Jarvis works well in a similar way to exquisite corpse writing. I'm not familiar with that term. I just did a quick Google search, and it seems like, is that something you're familiar with?
I'm not familiar with that.
So exquisite corpse, also known as exquisite cadaver, is a method in which a collection of words or images is collectively assembled. Each collaborator adds to a composition in sequence, either by following a rule or by being allowed to see only the end of what the previous person contributed.
Oh, interesting. So it's kind of like a popcorn story.
Okay,
almost.
So it's like, oh yeah, so it's when 2 writers add content together and one writes something, the next writer. Oh, cool. Let's just do the plane crash one and see where it takes us.
Okay, yeah, why not? So here's our premise. All right, so I'll go down here. We can give Jarvis some context over here as we continue to write. Let's see what we got. Any of these good as a working title?
I think The Strangers in Twilight Village is the one that makes the most sense.
Right.
Oh.
So this will be our working title.
The Terror in Twilight Village.
Terror in Twilight Village. So there, I'll put it over there.
Okay, cool.
Premise. We'll take out the your. Plane crash throughout. And then this is where kind of the interrogation might come into play, right? What is the terror? Highlight. Village of witches and warlocks.
Ooh.
Oh, it's coming out with a game.
You have to stay in the light through a game if you don't want to get caught by shadows. If you do, you will take 3 turns for them to catch up with you. However, let's keep it going.
Let's see what happens.
Nighttime is mandatory. If you miss your sleep, you keep reloading until... Oh, okay. So it's a terrible spell cast by witches and warlocks on this village. What if you're stuck in a simulation, like inside of a video game?
Oh, yeah. That could be the major reveal at the end.
Like
Play test for
you wake up, your plane crash landed in a small village in the middle of the night, but you don't remember getting on the plane.
It's coming up with a game. Hey, like to do? Let's do this. Let's find out who the main character of this story is. Who is our person? Who's our hero? Girl named Mitchie. She was just trying to survive what life throws at her. So that's interesting. I have here optional complete the fictional character backstory recipe, but let's ask some questions about Mitchie. She wants the safest life possible. Doesn't want to disturb others. But if we force her into this scenario, so let's just ask why.
Right.
Cautious and shy. Okay. See what Jarvis comes up if we just hit Command J.
Okay.
See what happens. She's trying to see what life throws at her. What is the world? It's a mix of modern day and old fashioned. Fear. Whoa.
She fears that her sister might kill her.
She fears that her sister might kill her, so we might put her sister on the island. The reason I'm asking these questions is because I'm trying to get to the core of this character. So I just started with asking who the main character is, Mitchie. And then from there, I'm just trying to get to, again, what drives her? What does she want? What does she fear? What does she actually need? And then usually I'll use that as a jumping off point to start the plot and tie in the terror to the character itself. Because ultimately I want, and that's another thing, I want my monster or my terror or my horror to connect to some sort of core element of the character themselves. To me, that's more impactful. To me, that's what my idols are doing right now. Is if you look at Midsommar, right? The main character, what she wants is family, is to belong, is to feel included. And in a weird, twisted way, at the end, the cult that she joins and that terrorizes the rest of her friend group includes her, makes her feel like she belongs to the point where she assimilates with that cult. So the terror kind of feeds into what that character wants. So right now, I'm trying to get at that character's core so I can start to connect the monster or the horror to my character. Darby, you've talked about kind of filling out a content brief. So we'll add these pieces that we found out about our main character, about the world itself into the content brief to give Jarvis maybe a little more context so that when we start plotting out those points or going through the story circle, Jarvis will understand what we're trying to do. I don't want to get at, I want to ask it one question. What causes the plane to crash? That might give us our first actual thought. It's been asking ourselves all throughout the story. Just trying to find out why this happened and what had caused it. So it looks like it's reading from over here. At one point, she felt like this was her fault and killed everyone on the plane. Let's just keep going. So here we're starting to get into some deeper, maybe character issues, right? And trying to figure out, okay, this is how Mitchie's story may connect to the shadows in the village and the plane crash. Maybe she's haunted by the shadows of her parents, right? By the shadows of her sister, so on and so forth. And they could be personification of that. There's a great character moment here. So now that we kind of have that template, that's where these 3 bullets come into play. So this is Dan Harmon's story circle right here. So a day in the life, call to action, refusal to call. You enter an unfamiliar situation. This is your inciting incident. The character adapts to it, gets what they wanted, but they pay a heavy price for it and return to the old world, transformed, having changed. And so these are kind of prompts to help flesh out those different plot points. And then from there, I would go in and start writing. But let's see. This might not be completely relevant to the story, but
work to the bakery.
Ready for what happens at night. So just kind of giving context. You can ask if it relates to the character itself, but maybe Should ask this. Maybe some background. Why does Mitchie get on the plane? Sorry, camp for church. Interesting. Ah. So again, like what we kind of experienced with the character backstory, it's already prompting the next thing or the next plot point in its own way. I'm just hitting compose and seeing how far Jarvis will go with this thread. So it's saying she's part of the village, which is kind of getting away from what we first had. Oh, what are they? They're not human beings, but rather something else. Ghosts.
Ghosts.
It's a good ghost story. Right now it's getting into a flood narrative. So we have a big chunk of plot points and stuff that, again, I think if I were to spend more time with this, I would go back through and kind of pick out, like you saw me doing, get really messy with Jarvis, pick out the sentences and pieces that I thought were engaging, that I really enjoyed, that I thought the story was going down, and continue to flesh out those pieces. So even though it's kind of going, it's fast brainstorming. It's kind of going in a different direction, but you don't have to stare at a blank page and wonder, where should I go? Where can I go? You can go one way, and if you don't like where Jarvis is going, you can
cut it
delete
off
and ask another question to go a different way. Or you can tinker with the information in the content brief. Let's say it seems to think that Mitchie is in the village. If you want to stick with the storyline that Mitchie's on the plane that crashes, you can say Mitchie take place. So you can clean this up. See, I wanted to clarify to Jarvis that this is the direction that we want to go. She's trying to spy what life throws at her. Let's take this out actually and just keep with the big plot points. Caught by shadows. It's like to be afraid of something. She finds out that's not easy. Stay away from the shadows when she first comes fears at night. So there's kind of a nice small character arc, okay, after tinkering with it. And then I can go back and start the process again and see if Jarvis gives me better direction. And so those could be my beats, right? Those could be the big arcs. Okay, she quickly finds out that strange things start to happen. Allow Jarvis, I can even hit this. Shadows are everywhere. And so you can, again, look through this, edit it, and that's what I do. It still takes a lot of guidance, but edit it and keep going until you feel like you have a complete story. And then you just start filling in the gaps from there. So yeah.
If you guys are interested in getting the recipes from Cade or myself, or want to just kind of, jump on these lives with us, comment below, let us know, and really thank Cade for his time coming in with us today. And we'll see you guys all at the next live.